The Morrison family's two-story house stood in a quiet suburban neighborhood outside Boston. It might not have been as grand as some of the neighboring homes, but the well-maintained garden and clean exterior told the story of a solid middle-class family. Elizabeth Morrison was a star student who always maintained top grades in her high school class. Her father Harold worked as a branch manager at a local insurance company, and her mother Charlotte taught English at the high school. From the time she could remember, Elizabeth had been raised to become the Morrison family's pride. However, the family's attention was always focused on her younger sister Catherine, who was 5 years her junior. "Elizabeth, aren't you going to show me your report card?" Charlotte asked without looking up from the sofa in the living room. "Yes, Mom." All as, Elizabeth said, nervously presenting her report card. Charlotte reviewed the document and frowned slightly. "You got an A in chemistry. That's lower than last semester. But I'm still top of the class. The test was really difficult." "I don't want to hear excuses," Charlotte set the report card aside. "Look at Catherine. She was selected to represent our state in the choral competition. Real talent means no excuses." Elizabeth nodded silently. Catherine had a beautiful singing voice and always took center stage at school events. Her parents never missed Catherine's recitals, but they often didn't show up for Elizabeth's science fairs, claiming they were too busy with work. The year Elizabeth turned 18, she received an acceptance letter with a full scholarship to a prestigious private university in the state. She rushed home that day, her heart pounding with excitement. "Mom, Dad. I got into Williams University. With a full scholarship." Harold displayed a rare, broad smile. "Well done. Now you can finally become a daughter who doesn't bring shame to our name." Those words cut deep into Elizabeth's heart. "Finally" was the key word. For 18 years, she had always been considered not good enough. However, her joy was short-lived. Within a month, her life changed dramatically. During a pre-graduation health check at school, Elizabeth discovered she was pregnant. The father was Michael Hamilton, a basketball player at the same high school. Elizabeth had started dating Michael as her own small act of rebellion against a home where she was always expected to be perfect. He was kind and the only person who truly listened to what she had to say. "Pregnant? That's impossible." Harold's angry voice echoed throughout the living room. "You are a disgrace to this family. You've ruined everything." Charlotte remained motionless as stone, looking down at Elizabeth with cold eyes. "What do you plan to do?" "We want to raise the child together. Michael says he'll take responsibility." "Don't be ridiculous." Harold rose from his chair. "I'm taking you to a doctor tomorrow to get an abortion, or you'll give the baby up for adoption. Choose." "But I want to have this baby. Michael and I." "Get rid of such naive thinking," Charlotte interjected. "Did you approach that boy because you thought his family was wealthy? You were fooled by the Hamilton name. He's just someone with the same name. He has no connection to the real Hamilton family." Elizabeth looked at her mother in surprise. "That's not why I'm dating him. I really feel that, Michael." "That's enough," Harold interrupted. "Make your decision today. Abortion or adoption. There are no other options." That night, Elizabeth locked herself in her small room and cried. She had made up her mind. She would raise this child. She tried to contact Michael, but his phone wasn't working. Later, she learned that Michael's parents had also discovered their relationship and quickly sent their son to stay with relatives out of state. The next morning, when Elizabeth announced her decision, her parents' reaction was cruel. "Get out," Harold said with a trembling voice. "You are no longer our daughter. Never show your face here again." Charlotte stood with her arms crossed, coldly watching as Elizabeth packed her things. "If you're going to expose our family's shame to the world, you no longer have a place here." Just 30 minutes later, Elizabeth was thrown out of the house she had lived in for 18 years, with only a few pieces of clothing and a little cash. Sitting on a bus stop bench in the pouring rain, she felt completely lost. Then, a phone call changed her life. It was from Michael. Elizabeth, I'm coming back to you. Let's raise this child together. It's our baby. He had returned to her despite his parents' opposition. And surprisingly, Michael's grandparents took their side. As it turned out, Michael Hamilton was not just someone with the same name as her mother had claimed, but actually a member of the Hamilton family, who owned a well-known real estate company in the area. I cannot accept how my son and his wife have handled this, Michael's grandfather Joseph said. You two are certainly too young, and yes, this wasn't planned. But family means supporting each other in difficult times. We're here for you. And so Elizabeth found a new family. She married Michael and gave birth to their son, James. Michael worked in the family business while attending college, and Elizabeth studied business management in night school. She occasionally sent letters and made phone calls to the Morrison household, but never received any response. As time passed, she stopped trying to make contact. Years went by, and their son James had grown into an excellent high school student at 17, aiming for medical school. Michael had become the CEO of Hamilton Real Estate Group, and Elizabeth had started her own interior design company that had gained an excellent reputation. They lived in a spacious home in the Boston suburbs and had built a happy family. Elizabeth would sometimes gaze in the direction of her childhood home, but the pain had gradually subsided over time. It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon with spring sunlight streaming through the window when the phone rang in Elizabeth's office. Thinking it was a client, she answered in a cheerful voice. Elizabeth Hamilton, Interior Design Masters. There was a moment of silence, and then a familiar yet cold voice spoke. Elizabeth, it's me. Your mother. Hearing her mother's voice for the first time in 17 years, Elizabeth sank into her chair. The air in the room suddenly felt heavy. Mom. She finally managed to say. Why? Catherine is getting married, Charlotte said in a businesslike tone. June 15th. We're planning a ceremony at the church and a reception at Hotel Venetian. Elizabeth felt her heart racing. She didn't know what kind of woman her sister had grown into. Catherine was just 13, still a little girl, when Elizabeth last saw her. I see. Congratulations. Please give my regards to Catherine, she tried to respond as calmly as possible. We want you to come, Charlotte's words were abrupt. Catherine wants all the family together for her wedding. Elizabeth caught her breath. All the family. For 17 years, she hadn't been a family. What had changed now? Yes, it would look strange if all blood relatives weren't there, Charlotte's voice held no warmth. There's our social standing to consider. People from work and neighbors will be there. Elizabeth's hand trembled. Social standing. Of course, that was the reason. Nothing had changed about their indifference to her existence. They just found it inconvenient to explain her absence. I'll think about it, Elizabeth answered briefly, and hung up. That evening, she explained the situation to Michael. Their 17-year-old son James joined the conversation. Both listened to her story seriously. You don't need to force yourself, Michael said, holding her hand. They threw you out. Now suddenly you're family again? James had been thoughtfully quiet, but eventually spoke up. Mom, do you actually want to see them? Your mother and sister, I mean? Elizabeth looked into her son's intelligent eyes and sighed. Honestly, I don't know. For a long time, I didn't want to see them. But now. The next day, calls and messages from Charlotte increased. Relatives also began contacting her one after another. Your family, so of course you should attend, Elizabeth's aunt said. Let bygones be bygones. It's Catherine's special day. Wouldn't it be sad if you didn't come, another relative added. The pressure grew stronger day by day. Elizabeth spent sleepless nights. When she had been suffering, no one had reached out to help her. Why should she now accommodate their convenience? I'll decline, she finally decided. Michael, I'll call my mother and tell her I won't be coming. However, that night, she found herself thinking about her sister. Was it true that Catherine really wanted her at the wedding, or was it just pressure from their parents? Suddenly, she wanted to speak directly with Catherine. The next morning, Elizabeth called her sister's number, which she had obtained from Charlotte. "Hello," a young woman's voice answered. "Catherine?" "It's Elizabeth." There was a moment of silence. "Elizabeth. Big sis?" Catherine's voice trembled. "Yes, I heard about your wedding from Mom." "Congratulations." "Thank you." Catherine's voice gradually became steadier. "Are you really coming?" Elizabeth decided to tell the truth. "Honestly, I'm torn. For 17 years, I didn't hear a word from any of you. Now suddenly being invited as a family." "I understand," Catherine said in a small voice. "I was still a child back then. But I've always thought about you. A few years ago, I tried to contact you secretly, but our parents stopped me." Elizabeth sensed sincerity in her sister's voice. "I'm so sorry about what happened back then," Catherine continued. "I couldn't do anything. But now it's different. I want to see you. I really do." Something moved in Elizabeth's heart. Catherine had been a victim too. She was just a child then. "What's your husband to be like?" Elizabeth changed the subject. "David is a lawyer. He's kind and compassionate." Catherine's voice brightened. "He has 2 children from a previous marriage, but he's a wonderful father." They talked for over 30 minutes. Elizabeth could tell from Catherine's voice that she genuinely wanted to see her sister. "If I come, I want to bring Michael and James," Elizabeth said. "They are my family." "Of course." Catherine's voice was bright. "Michael is the same one from back then? You've been together all this time?" "Yes, he's a wonderful husband. And James is already 17 now. Oh, to think I have a nephew. I'm looking forward to meeting him." Catherine's words contained genuine joy. After that conversation, Elizabeth realized something unexpected. She wanted to celebrate her sister's happiness. And she wanted to show them the life she had built. To show that the girl once called the family's disgrace was now a successful businesswoman who had built a happy family. When she told Michael and James about her decision, they promised to support her. "But I'm not just going to attend as a good girl," Elizabeth smiled. "We have nothing to be ashamed of in our lives." A plan was already forming in her mind. Her husband would wear a top-of-the-line Armani suit. Her son would dress appropriately for an excellent high school student aiming for Harvard University. And she herself would wear an elegant dress that told the story of her success. 4 weeks until the wedding. While Elizabeth felt hopeful about her new relationship with Catherine, she began preparing herself emotionally for the reunion with her parents. On the wedding day, Boston was bathed in early summer sunlight. When the Hamilton family of 3 appeared in the luxurious lobby of Hotel Venetian, a small murmur swept through the crowd. Elizabeth had her medium-length hair elegantly styled up and was wearing a midnight blue silk dress. A discreet but real diamond pendant sparkled on her shoulder, and around her wrist was a thin platinum bracelet that her husband had given her when her business took off. Michael was dressed in a perfectly fitted Armani suit, the very image of a successful businessman. And their son James stood beside his parents with an impressive presence that combined youth and intelligence. Mr. and Mrs. Hamilton, the reception staff bowed politely. "You're Catherine's family. Please sign here." As Elizabeth was signing the guest book, she felt someone watching her. Turning around, she saw her parents standing there with tense expressions. Face to face after 17 years. Charlotte looked older than before. Her hair, pulled back severely, was streaked with gray, and fine wrinkles had formed around her eyes. Harold, too, had changed from his once dignified appearance, seeming to have shrunk a little. "Elizabeth," Charlotte said in a small voice. "You came." Elizabeth smiled calmly. "It's my sister's special day. I came for Catherine." An awkward silence followed. Then, Charlotte's eyes moved to James. "Is this your child?" she asked. There was a clear reluctance to acknowledge her grandson. "Yes, this is our son, James," Elizabeth said proudly. James, these are your grandparents, Charlotte and Harold. James bowed with the politeness of a well-bred young man. It's nice to meet you. I'm honored to be part of Aunt Catherine's special day. Charlotte and Harold were clearly surprised. Standing before them was a refined young man, far from the child of shame they had imagined. And this is my husband, Michael Hamilton, Elizabeth continued. Harold frowned. Hamilton? The same. CEO of Hamilton Real Estate Group, Michael said in a confident voice, extending his hand to Harold. I'm always grateful to your daughter. She's a wonderful wife and business partner. Harold couldn't hide his shock and weakly shook Michael's hand. Charlotte's face had gone pale. It seems to be time to enter, Michael said, checking his watch. Shall we take our seats? As they entered the church, an usher guided them to seats near the front. A small buzz arose among the relatives and friends, with whispers of, "Is that Elizabeth?" and "Is that the rumored?" being heard. The ceremony began solemnly. Catherine, dressed in a white lace gown, entered on Harold's arm. When her eyes found Elizabeth, she gave a small nod and smile. After the ceremony, at the reception venue, the Hamilton family greeted Catherine and David. Catherine embraced Elizabeth with tears in her eyes. Thank you for coming, she whispered. I'm so happy to see you. David also greeted Elizabeth warmly. Catherine has told me a lot about you. It's an honor to finally meet you. As the reception began and the time for speeches came, Harold stood up. He thanked the bride and groom and the attendees, and began speaking about how important family bonds are. There have been trials at times, but true family ultimately comes together, he said. Today, we have gathered again in complete form. Elizabeth felt anger at those words. Complete form? She and her family had been excluded for 17 years. Yet, she continued to smile quietly. Today was Catherine's day. She shouldn't get emotional. During the ceremony, Elizabeth's Aunt Mary visited her table. Elizabeth, I'm so glad you're back, Mary said quietly. What happened back then was terrible. To see you've become so successful. I'm proud of you. Other relatives also came by, showing interest in Elizabeth's family. Some were surprised to hear Michael's surname was Hamilton, asking, that Hamilton family? Others were amazed to hear about James's college aspirations. Aiming for Harvard Medical School, her cousin Judith asked in surprise. That's amazing. Gradually, the true nature of Elizabeth's family spread among the guests. Far from being the family's disgrace, they were something to be proud of. Toward the end of the reception, after speeches from the bride and groom's friends, the MC suddenly took the microphone. Now, we'd like to hear a few words from the bride's sister, Elizabeth Hamilton. As the venue fell silent, Elizabeth accepted the microphone with surprise. Catherine nodded and smiled. This had been arranged by her sister beforehand. Elizabeth took a deep breath and stood up. Around her, her parents sat with tense expressions. I am truly happy to be here today on my dear sister Catherine's joyous day, Elizabeth began calmly. As some of you may know, I have been separated from this family for 17 years. The venue became deadly quiet. When I was 18, I became pregnant. My parents called me the family's disgrace and immediately threw me out of the house. Elizabeth's voice stated the facts plainly, without becoming emotional. For the following 17 years, despite my many attempts to make contact, there was never any response. Harold and Charlotte blushed and looked down. Elizabeth had James stand up. This is my son, James. He is currently aiming to enter Harvard University Medical School. A murmur went through the crowd. A small smile appeared on Elizabeth's lips. And this is my husband Michael, CEO of Hamilton Real Estate Group. Michael also stood up and nodded to the audience. When we had a child at a young age, his family was initially hesitant, but they quickly accepted us as family. They chose family bonds over social standing. Elizabeth continued. What is a true family disgrace? Is it loving and raising a child? Or is it abandoning a daughter in need? The venue was deathly quiet. Elizabeth took a deep breath and softened her tone. However, today is my sister's happy day. I didn't come to rehash the past, but to celebrate Catherine's new journey in life. She turned to Catherine and gave her a genuine smile. Catherine, I wish you all the happiness in the world. David is a wonderful person. May your new life together be filled with joy. A huge round of applause erupted from the venue. Catherine stood up with tears in her eyes, rushed to Elizabeth, and embraced her. Thank you, she whispered. You truly are a strong sister. After the speech, many guests visited Elizabeth's table to praise her courage. Her parents, red-faced with embarrassment and agitation, barely spoke to anyone. At the end of the reception, Elizabeth and Michael presented Catherine and the groom with tickets for a luxurious New Zealand trip. Just a small celebration gift from us, Elizabeth handed Catherine an envelope containing the tickets. A 2-week trip, all arranged. It includes a cruise on Milford Sound. The lavishness of the gift caused a stir among the guests. It overshadowed the modest gifts prepared by her parents. Let's keep in touch from now on, Elizabeth gently told Catherine. Yes, I never want to be apart again, Catherine responded. As Elizabeth hugged her sister, she felt this was the moment a new family bond was being born. In her heart, she felt some of the pain she had carried for years beginning to heal. She smiled quietly. She was no longer the family's disgrace. She had proven her worth and shown everyone around her the true meaning of family. A week later, Elizabeth was finishing a design proposal for a client in her New England-style home office. A well-maintained garden was visible through the large windows, and bird songs pleasantly filled the air. The phone rang, and she looked up. It was an unknown number. Hello, Elizabeth Hamilton. Elizabeth, her father's voice came through the phone. It's Harold, your father. Elizabeth caught her breath for a moment. She had never expected a call from her father. What is it? She asked calmly. I want to talk, Harold's voice trembled, clearly agitated. Preferably in person. Elizabeth hesitated. The face-to-face meeting at the wedding had been an emotionally draining experience. However, a strong curiosity was also growing in her heart. All right. Let's meet tomorrow afternoon at Café La Burra near Boston Common, she suggested. The next day, Elizabeth arrived at the cafe a little early. She chose a window seat and waited for her father. 10 minutes later, Harold arrived. He looked even older than at the wedding. There was no trace of the dignified insurance branch manager of the past. He looked like an old man with slumped shoulders. Sit down, Elizabeth said quietly. Harold sat down and remained silent for a while. When he finally spoke, his voice was weak. After what happened at the wedding, the way people look at us has changed, he said. Friends and relatives have started criticizing us. They say, how could you have done such a thing? Elizabeth listened in silence. Her father's words revealed more anxiety about losing social standing than genuine remorse. Elizabeth, I'm sorry, Harold said, looking down. Throwing you out of the house back then was wrong. Elizabeth took a sip of her cold iced tea and slowly looked at her father. For 17 years, you tried to erase my existence. What are you asking for now? Can we start over? Harold said. As a family? Family, that word still caused pain in her heart. Forgiveness and returning to our old relationship are two different things, she said quietly. You need me now because you're worried about how others see you, right? Harold didn't answer. That was his answer. I have a family. Michael and James. And now I'm in touch with Catherine, Elizabeth continued. But with you and Mom, it will take time. Harold sighed deeply. I understand. But, can we at least stay in touch? I'll think about it, Elizabeth answered briefly. Later, Charlotte also contacted her. But her attitude was very different from Harold's. On the phone, Charlotte accused Elizabeth of making us feel ashamed and criticized her wedding speech as inconsiderate. Mom, Elizabeth sighed. You should accept the consequences of your actions. I only stated facts. You threw me out. If you were embarrassed to hear that in front of the family, perhaps you shouldn't have done it? Charlotte hung up in anger. While Elizabeth felt tired, she also felt a strange sense of liberation. For 17 years, she had suppressed the conflict with her parents deep inside. Now, finally, she could bring it out and face it. Meanwhile, she had started communicating frequently with Catherine. As soon as her sister returned from her honeymoon, she called Elizabeth to thank her. It was a wonderful trip. Thank you, Catherine said. And I'm really glad you came to the wedding. I want us to have a real sisterly relationship from now on. Elizabeth was genuinely happy about that. While lost time couldn't be recovered, new relationships could be built. At the end of May, James's high school graduation was approaching. He was set to give the valedictorian speech. Mom, James brought up one night after dinner. Can I invite Grandma and Grandpa to the graduation? Elizabeth looked at her son in surprise. Really? James shrugged. You don't have to forgive them. But if they really want to change, maybe we can give them a chance. Plus, he smiled a bit sheepishly, I kind of want to show them how awesome I am. Michael burst out laughing. You've really grown up, son. Elizabeth pondered. I'll contact them tomorrow, she decided. When she informed her parents about the invitation to the graduation and the party afterward, they answered with voices that seemed surprised and relieved. We'll be there, Harold said. Thank you, Elizabeth. On graduation day, Harold and Charlotte appeared at the lavish party at the Hamilton mansion, clearly out of place. However, they were moved to witness their grandson's growth for the first time, seeing him graduate with top honors and speak passionately about his future in medicine. Why do you want to become a doctor? Charlotte asked her grandson during the party. Because I know how my mother struggled alone, James answered quietly. She had no one to help her. So I want a job where I can help people in need. Charlotte teared up and looked at Elizabeth. For the first time, genuine regret appeared in her eyes. Harold, too, in conversation with Michael, had to acknowledge the value of the life they had built. At the end of the party, the two approached Elizabeth. We were wrong, Harold said. There was no falsity in his voice. We underestimated your strength and love. I regretted not seeing you every day during those 17 years, Charlotte also said. But pride and shame kept me from reaching out. Elizabeth took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. Forgiveness will take time, she said. But this might be a new beginning. As her parents were about to leave, Elizabeth unexpectedly stepped forward and lightly embraced her mother's shoulders. It wasn't a full hug, but it was a small step toward reconciliation. That night, Elizabeth and Michael were drinking wine on the terrace, looking up at the starry sky. What do you think? Michael asked, taking his wife's hand. I don't know yet, Elizabeth answered. But at least I feel like I can move forward without being trapped by the past. 6 months after James's graduation, on a beautiful autumn day when New England's foliage was at its most splendid, a family dinner was held at Elizabeth and Michael's home. The spacious dining room hosted Catherine and her husband David, as well as Harold and Charlotte. The atmosphere was more relaxed than before, though some awkwardness remained. Charlotte made several efforts to keep the conversation flowing, and Harold asked many questions about his grandson's college life. Toward the end of dinner, James stood up and said, I have an important announcement. All eyes turned to him. Last week, I received an early acceptance notification from Harvard University Medical School. Cheers and applause erupted around the table. Michael embraced his son's shoulders, and Elizabeth had tears in her eyes. Congratulations, James, Charlotte said. She took out a small box. This is the first present from your grandmother. James opened the box and found an old silver stethoscope. My father, your great-grandfather, was a doctor, Charlotte quietly explained. This is what he used. I want you to have it as a family heirloom. Elizabeth looked at her mother in surprise. She hadn't known her grandfather was a doctor. Thank you, Grandma, James said, moved. I'll treasure it. After dinner, Elizabeth and Charlotte were alone in the kitchen. Charlotte held a wine glass, staring out the window at the garden. "I regretted it every day for 17 years, she suddenly said. But pride and shame kept me from reaching out. Elizabeth stopped wiping the dishes. "I lost sight of what was important because I was too concerned about appearances," Charlotte continued. "I underestimated your strength. Without the love and support we didn't give you, you built a wonderful family." She looked at Elizabeth. "I didn't have that courage." Elizabeth understood her mother's weakness and humanity for the first time. She nodded silently. It wasn't complete forgiveness, but it was the first step toward understanding. A year later, at a family party celebrating James's medical school entrance, Harold unusually gave a toast. "I made the biggest mistake of my life," he began quietly. "I lost 17 years with my daughter and grandson. But they were stronger and more loving than I was. Now, we are starting over as a new family." He raised his glass. "To James's future, and to our new bonds." As Elizabeth raised her glass, she felt that while lost years couldn't be recovered, new relationships could be built. The rejection she experienced at 18 had made her stronger and more compassionate. And now she knew the true meaning of family. It wasn't just about blood ties, but about supporting each other, especially in difficult times. Sometimes Catherine would visit her company and they would go to lunch together. Sometimes her mother would call and they would talk about trivial everyday matters. The relationship wasn't perfect, but it was gradually progressing. The girl once called the family's disgrace had now become a proud woman who not only proved her worth but also taught those around her the true meaning of family. And now she continued to walk toward the future, healing the pain of the past.